Hello Traveler, and welcome to an early edition of the Invokation Akademy Review Session for the upcoming 4.2 patch. I recently ran a poll to see if you prefer the existing timing of a week into the patch or an earlier video based on some predictions, and the vote was pretty close to being a 50-50. So what better way to solve that than to do both, and this is the perfect patch for it. Not only did we get the new cards, but we got an incredible number of balance changes. Of particular note, many talents got buffed or reworked, and in combination with the new Storm Terror's Lair card, these could really shake up the meta going into 4.2. For now though, we'll save all of the new cards for the usual review session. Instead, today we'll focus only on the balance changes, and I'll provide my first impressions on which ones are going to be the most impactful. First up, the only non-character related change, Joyous Celebration, the new arcane card, got a much needed change. Rather than applying elements to all your characters, it now only applies to those affected already by an element. This is really how the card should have worked from the start, but despite being greatly improved, we have a lot of powerful arcane legends, and I still don't think it's worth running over some of the others, particularly the newest one just released. Still, if we ever have decks that run 2 of these for flexibility, this is at least now playable. Next up, we have nerfs to 3 of the most dominant character cards currently in TCG, Shenhe, Oceanid, and Itto. Shenhe's skill now only provides 2 stacks of Icy Quills, down from 3. This is a pretty fair change, as her skill had incredible value at 3 stacks. With 2, she's definitely weaker than before, but still has her powerful burst. Shenhe decks should still be very strong, and you didn't always use up all 3 stacks anyway, so don't let this change scare you away from playing her decks. Oceanid's burst was changed with her base damage going up from 2 to 4, but the increase per summon going down from 2 to 1. The math is a little confusing, but in short, her burst is better with 0 or 1 summons, the same at 2 summons, and worse at 3 and 4 summons. This change makes sense, as it's really easy to maintain your summon board with just how many summon characters have been released so far. While her burst was definitely a powerful threat, this doesn't change her primary function of providing Hydro summons, so this shouldn't affect her decks all too much either. But the king of the meta, Itto, got a pretty sizable nerf, with his initial burst damage going down from 5 to 4, but more importantly, the normal attack buff is now only +1 damage, down from +2. While it doesn't sound like a lot, this means that with the bell equipped, his attacks go from 6 to 5 damage, which makes it much less consistent to OTK, as any shield, barrier, or healing effect can force you to use up an additional attack. Another way to think about it, Itto decks are often using 5 attacks with their burst, so a 1 damage reduction is closer to a 5 damage overall reduction to his damage potential. His power level has been cut back to be a lot closer to Noelle's now, and in fact I could see Noelle being the better choice in most cases. While still a strong choice for casual decks, I expect this change to push him out of the competitive meta at least for some time, so goodbye Oni, I'm sure you won't be missed. Next up, we have the talent card buffs. We'll start with several characters whose talents were originally more expensive than their base skills, which led to them seeing no play. These have now been reduced back to the same cost as their base skill, making them much better than before. Let's go over them one by one and refresh your memory on what they do. Xingqiu's talent is largely unchanged, but does lower the threshold for rain swords to trigger from 3 damage to 2 damage. Overall though, it's still just 1 extra damage mitigation, so not really worth playing even at the new cost. Most Xingqiu decks are also using him for burst and don't really care that much for the reduction, so would not recommend this one. The effect of Mirror Maiden's talent remains unchanged, however she still suffers from the problem of having a base 2 damage skill, and this effect on the talent isn't enough to justify it. Would not recommend this one either. Barbara's talent remains unchanged, but even at the new cost, still not worth it. Even though you get to use it twice, it's very conditional, and you're better off just using changing shifts instead. Not recommended. Chongyun's talent, however, is very exciting. Even though it no longer extends the field duration by 1, that often wasn't really utilized by decks anyway. At the new cost, it looks really great if you're looking to build a combo deck around normal attack characters like Ayaka or Razor to combo with Chongyun. I would definitely encourage giving this one a try in any Chongyun combo decks. Likewise, Xianling's talent looks really great. The effect was always powerful, but not worth the extra die cost. Now that it's only 3, this essentially turns her into a more powerful version of Fischl, who I'm sure you know is already extremely good. On top of that, some decks were already starting to use Xianling after they buffed her burst, so I think this talent card now goes quite well in any decks that are already using her. Definitely going to give this one a try. Razor's talent got a slight adjustment to only be able to be triggered once a round, but you were never really triggering this too many times anyway, so not really an impactful change. This is actually now a nice way to get Razor up to his burst immediately with no extra dice cost. Could definitely be worth including if you have a deck that wants to build up Razor's burst quickly and you aren't already using Raiden. The effect of Candace's talent remains unchanged. While the effect looks really similar to Xianling's talent, it's a lot harder to make use of that extra Hydro application because you're already doing a Hydro hit in the first place with her infusion. Probably still not worth it, but if you have a lot of other elemental applications in your deck, this could be worth using. And while technically not a skill, Electrocube's talent was also reduced from 3 to 2 cost. The best way to think about this is that it's essentially now a heal card that heals for at least 4 HP, sometimes more, depending on how much extra damage you take when you revive. At just 2 dice, it's actually not that bad. If your deck likes using cube a lot, maybe consider running this. Sarah's talent technically was also reduced too, but it got changed to use her skill now instead of her burst. Unfortunately, it still has the same effect, which is pretty narrow as Sarah is rarely used in double electro teams, so this probably still won't see much play. Next up, there are some talents that had the same cost as before, but saw some improvements. Yoimiya's talent now provides an additional usage of her buff going up from 2 to 3 stacks. This is actually pretty great, as it now lines up better with other effects like Minty Meat Rolls, as well as building up to a burst with that 3 energy. With the pyro damage buff and the added attack, you can think of this as essentially a +4 damage card for 1 pyro, provided you can stick on Yoimiya long enough. This is actually quite a good card if you're looking to build a deck focused around Yoimiya's normal attack. Beidou's talent was buffed quite significantly. Even though the effect is unchanged, it no longer requires you to block the attack with her skill before getting the discount on your normal attacks. This is huge, as it lets you set up her burst immediately in the first round by giving you 2 extra normal attacks, all for the total of only 7 dice. Beidou decks were already starting to creep up in popularity, and I wouldn't be surprised if this change pushes it over the top, and I'm definitely excited to try it out. Amber's talent got buffed to now do 4 damage up from 3. It's a nice buff, but still awkward to use, and I don't think a compelling reason unless you're already playing Amber. Kokomi's talent got a really nice rework, now adding +1 usage to the jellyfish, and also summoning a new one if you don't already have one summoned. This is actually quite a great buff, as refreshing was basically only helpful when you had exactly 1 usage left, and the effect is pretty much identical to the +1 we're getting now. Now this card is great at 0 or 2 usages of her summon. Unfortunately, Kokomi Burst is still not particularly strong, but if you're building a deck focused around her, then you should definitely consider the talent. And we have 2 characters that have a change to their base skills, which of course carries over to their talents. Yanfei now allows you to stack up to 2 instances of Scarlet Seal instead of just the 1 limit. This is a really nice buff, as not only does it make it easier to make use of the Scarlet Seal stacks on her burst, you now have the option of chaining together 2 of these charge attacks in a row. Her talent got a weird upgrade, now giving the additional effect of drawing you a card whenever Scarlet Seal is used. This is the first time we've seen a character's skill actually draw you cards. I'm pretty excited. While it's a minor effect, it's actually quite nice, and honestly, any deck looking to use Yanfei should include this, as it's essentially free. Jean's burst was reduced from 3 to 2 energy, but now her summon only does 1 Anemo damage at the end of round instead of 2. While definitely a buff, unfortunately Anemo decks in general aren't really looking to sell out the game anymore, particularly when you have characters like Wanderer, so she's still in a bit of a weird spot. But this could be a reason to go back to the Sucrose Jean double Anemo list that really bullied around opponents early on in TCG. Overall though, this really doesn't solve her biggest weakness, which is that her burst doesn't actually do any damage initially, so unfortunately probably not enough of a buff. Well, there you have it, all the balance changes for version 4.2. I'm really glad they took the time to rework some of these talents that no one uses, as some of them have really cool effects, but were just not quite competitively costed. If I were to pick my top 3 talents to watch out for, it'd be Chongyun, Xianling, and Beidou. And while I'm equally excited for the new characters and cards, that will have to wait for another lesson. There are of course plenty of other unused talents as well right now in the game, so hopefully this is a sign that in the future we'll see more updates and buffs to those cards as well. If you are a newer player, be sure to attend the TCG 101 series to level up your Genius Invocation game. If there's anything you'd like to see in an upcoming video, drop a comment and I'll see how I can help. Be sure to enroll in our courses by subscribing so you can be notified when a new lesson's available. Until then, class dismissed!